Jacob's Journey, a biblical bedtime story. As the day draws to its close and the world settles into quiet, we find ourselves at the threshold between waking and sleeping, between the known and the mysterious. In these precious moments before rest claims us, there's something profound about returning to the ancient stories that have shaped human hearts for thousands of years. Tonight, we journey back through time to meet a man whose name was changed by an encounter with the divine. His story is one of struggle and grace, of deception and redemption, of a restless heart that finally found its home in the arms of something greater than itself. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders release their burden from the day. Allow your mind to quiet as we step into the world of tents and starlit deserts, of dreams and wrestling matches with angels, of a man named Jacob, whose very name meant the one who grasps. In the flickering light of ancient campfires, stories were told that carried more than entertainment. They carried the weight of meaning, the promise of hope, and the assurance that even in our most broken moments, we are not abandoned. So settle in, dear listener, as we walk alongside Jacob through the wilderness of his choices and into the promised land of his transformation. Our story begins not with Jacob alone, but with his twin brother Esau, for their tale is inseparable from the moment of their birth. Even in their mother Rebekah's womb, these brothers struggled, as if the entire world wasn't large enough for both of their destinies. When they finally emerged into the world, Esau came first, red and hairy, strong and wild like the earth itself. But Jacob followed immediately after, his tiny hand grasping his brother's heel, as if unwilling to accept second place, as if already plotting to overtake the one who had beaten him by mere moments. Their father Isaac loved Esau for his skillful hunting and the taste of wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob, perhaps seeing in her quieter son something that others missed, a hunger not for food but for blessing, for meaning, for connection with the divine promises that had been spoken over their family. Jacob grew up in the shadows of tents while Esau roamed the open fields. Where Esau was impulsive and immediate, Jacob was calculating and patient. Where Esau lived for the moment, Jacob dreamed of the future. And in that dreaming, that constant reaching for something more, we see the first glimpses of a soul that was destined for greatness, even if the path would be marked by stumbling. The moment that would define Jacob's early life came on an ordinary day that became extraordinary through a single, irreversible choice. Esau returned from hunting, exhausted and famished, his body crying out for immediate relief. The aroma of Jacob's lentil stew filled the tent, rich and satisfying, promising comfort to empty bellies. "Please," Esau begged, "let me eat some of that red stew, for I am famished." But Jacob, ever the negotiator, saw opportunity in his brother's desperation. "First sell me your birthright," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was asking. The birthright, sacred inheritance that belonged to the firstborn, carrying with it not just material wealth, but spiritual authority, the privilege of leading the family and carrying forward the promises of God. To Esau, weakened by hunger and focused only on the present moment, it seemed like an abstract concept compared to the very real need gnawing at his stomach. "I'm about to die," Esau declared with the dramatic flair of youth. Of what use is a birthright to me? And so, for a bowl of stew, for the satisfaction of immediate desire over long-term vision, the sacred birthright changed hands. Jacob had what he wanted, but the victory must have tasted bitter even as the stew was sweet. Years passed, and Isaac grew old, his eyes dim with age. The time came for the final blessing, that powerful pronouncement that would seal the future of his sons. Isaac called for Esau, asking him to hunt game and prepare a meal, after which he would receive the blessing that was his due as the elder son. But Rebekah, who had listened at the tent door, saw this as the moment to secure what she believed was Jacob's divine destiny. She conspired with her younger son, dressing him in Esau's clothes, covering his smooth skin with goat hair, and sending him to his father with a meal prepared by her own hands. Jacob approached his father's bedside, his heart surely pounding with the weight of the deception he was about to commit. When Isaac questioned him, Jacob lied smoothly, claiming to be Esau. The old man, though suspicious, was fooled by the hairy hands and the familiar scent of the outdoors that clung to Esau's clothes. And so Isaac blessed Jacob, thinking he was blessing Esau. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. The blessing was spoken, and in that ancient world, such words carried the weight of destiny itself. They could not be taken back, could not be unsaid, could not be transferred once given. When Esau returned with his game and discovered what had happened, his cry of anguish echoed through the tent. "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But Isaac could only weep with his son, for the blessing was gone, given to the one who had grasped it through cunning rather than inheritance. Esau's heart burned with hatred, and he vowed to kill his brother once their father died. Rebekah, hearing of this threat, knew that Jacob must flee, and so she sent her beloved son away, ostensibly to find a wife among her brother Laban's daughters, but really to save his life from his brother's justified rage. Jacob left his father's house carrying nothing but a staff and the weight of his choices. As night fell on his first day of exile, he found himself in a desolate place with nothing but stones for pillows and the vast sky for a covering. He must have wondered if his grasping had finally cost him everything: his home, his family, his security. But it was there, in that place of utter vulnerability, that heaven chose to break through. As Jacob slept, he dreamed a dream that would echo through the ages. He saw a ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. At the top of the ladder stood the Lord himself, and his voice broke through Jacob's troubled sleep with words of promise. "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and the God of your father, Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Jacob woke from his dream with the overwhelming awareness that he had encountered the divine. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it," he whispered into the dawn light. He took the stone that had served as his pillow and set it up as a pillar, pouring oil on it and naming the place Bethel, the house of God. This moment marked the beginning of Jacob's transformation, though the process would take decades to complete. For the first time in his life, he had received something not through his own scheming, but through divine grace. The God of his fathers had chosen to continue the covenant through him, not because of his worthiness, but because of divine faithfulness. Jacob continued his journey to the land of his mother's people, and there he met Rachel at the well. Beautiful Rachel, tending her father's sheep. It was love at first sight, the kind of instant recognition that made all his previous grasping seem pale in comparison. Here was something worth waiting for, worth working for, worth sacrificing for. He approached Laban, Rachel's father, and agreed to work 7 years for the right to marry her. The Bible tells us that these 7 years seemed to Jacob like only a few days because of his love for her. For the first time in his life, Jacob was willing to wait, to earn something honestly rather than steal it. But Laban was a man cut from the same cloth as Jacob, a deceiver who had met his match. On the wedding night, in the darkness of the tent, Laban substituted his older daughter Leah for Rachel. Jacob, who had deceived his own blind father, was now deceived in his blindness of love and celebration. When morning came and Jacob discovered the deception, his outrage was met with Laban's calm explanation. "It is not so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn." The words must have cut deep, for they echoed Jacob's own violation of that natural order when he had stolen Esau's birthright and blessing. Laban offered Jacob a deal: work another 7 years, and Rachel would be his as well. Jacob agreed, and so began a period of his life where he learned what it meant to be on the receiving end of someone else's schemes. For 20 years, Jacob served Laban, and for 20 years, he experienced the frustration of having his wages changed again and again, of being manipulated and deceived by someone cleverer than himself. It was a hard school, but perhaps the only one that could teach Jacob what his victims had felt, what his brother had endured, what it meant to be the one grasped rather than the one grasping. Jacob's family grew in complexity and pain. Leah, unloved but fertile, bore him son after son, each time hoping that this child would finally win her husband's affection. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, each name telling the story of her longing and disappointment. Rachel, beloved but barren, watched her sister's fruitfulness with growing desperation. The rivalry between the sisters played out through their children and their servants, each trying to prove her worth through the sons she could give Jacob. When Rachel finally conceived and bore Joseph, Jacob's joy was complete. Here was the son of his beloved wife, the child of his heart. And perhaps here we see one of Jacob's greatest failures, his inability to love his children equally, his repetition of the favoritism that had torn his own family apart. The family dynamics were poisonous. The older sons saw their father's preference for Joseph and later for Benjamin, Rachel's second son. They felt the sting of being less loved, less valued, less important in their father's eyes. The seeds of future conflict were sown in these unequal affections. After 20 years of exile, God told Jacob it was time to return home. But between Jacob and his homeland stood his brother Esau, and the fear of Esau's long-held hatred. Jacob sent messengers ahead to gauge his brother's disposition, and they returned with news that chilled his heart. Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. Jacob's old nature reasserted itself. He divided his family and possessions into two camps, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. He sent elaborate gifts ahead, hoping to appease his brother's anger. He prayed, perhaps for the first time with genuine desperation rather than mere formality. The night before the encounter, Jacob sent his family across the river Jabbok and remained alone on the other side. It was there, in the darkness and solitude, that his life's greatest wrestling match began. A man appeared and wrestled with Jacob until dawn. This was no ordinary opponent. As the night wore on, it became clear that Jacob was wrestling with a divine being, an angel, perhaps even God himself in some mysterious form. The wrestling was intense, physical, real. Jacob poured all his strength, all his determination, all his lifelong habit of grasping and striving into this supernatural contest. But as dawn approached, his opponent touched Jacob's hip socket, dislocating it, demonstrating that he could have ended the contest at any moment. Still, Jacob held on. Even injured, even defeated, he would not let go. "I will not let you go unless you bless me," he declared. "What is your name?" the divine wrestler asked. "Jacob," he replied. "Jacob, the grasper, the deceiver, the one who supplants. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Israel, the one who wrestles with God." It was a new identity, a new destiny, a new understanding of what it meant to struggle with the divine. Jacob had spent his life wrestling with men through deception and manipulation. Now he had wrestled with God himself through honest desperation and emerged transformed. When Jacob asked for his wrestler's name, he received no answer except a blessing. As the sun rose, the divine figure vanished, leaving Jacob alone, limping, changed forever. Jacob limped toward his encounter with Esau, no longer the smooth deceiver who had fled 20 years earlier, but a man marked by his encounter with the divine. When he saw his brother approaching with 400 men, he bowed 7 times, humbling himself completely. But Esau's response was not what Jacob had feared. Instead of violence, there were tears. Instead of revenge, there was forgiveness. Esau ran to meet his brother, embraced him, kissed him, and they wept together. "What do you mean by all this company that I have met?" Esau asked, referring to the gifts Jacob had sent ahead. "To find favor in the sight of my Lord," Jacob replied. But Esau, now wealthy in his own right, tried to refuse the gifts. "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob insisted, "Please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." In those words, we see the depth of Jacob's transformation. He had literally seen the face of God in his wrestling match, and now he saw something of that same divine grace reflected in his brother's forgiveness. Jacob settled in the land of his fathers, but his story was far from over. The consequences of his favoritism toward Joseph would soon tear his family apart in ways that echoed his own fractured relationship with Esau. Joseph, the dreamer, the beloved son, shared his visions of future greatness with his brothers, not realizing how his words would fan the flames of their resentment. When Jacob gave Joseph a special coat, a visible symbol of his preference, the brothers' hatred reached its breaking point. The day came when the brothers, pasturing their flocks far from home, saw an opportunity to rid themselves of the one they saw as a threat to their inheritance and their father's affection. They sold Joseph into slavery and returned to Jacob with the bloodied coat, letting him believe that his beloved son had been killed by wild animals. Jacob's grief was overwhelming, inconsolable. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son for many days. "I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning," he declared, and it seemed that his spirit was broken beyond repair. For years, Jacob lived with this grief, not knowing that Joseph was alive in Egypt, rising to power through the same providence that had protected Jacob himself through all his wanderings and wrestlings. When famine struck the land and Jacob's sons went to Egypt to buy grain, they unknowingly stood before their lost brother, now second in command to Pharaoh himself. The story of their recognition, Joseph's testing of his brothers, and the eventual revelation of his identity is filled with drama and emotion. But perhaps the most moving moment came when Joseph sent word to his father. Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. The Bible tells us that Jacob's heart nearly stopped, for he did not believe them. But when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him to Egypt, his spirit revived. "It is enough," he said. "Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The reunion between father and son, after so many years of separation and grief, was tender beyond words. Joseph fell on his father's neck and wept, and Jacob said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Jacob spent his final years in Egypt, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, watching his family grow into the beginnings of a great nation. When his time came to die, he blessed each of his sons, speaking prophetically over their futures and the futures of the tribes that would descend from them. As he had received his father's blessing through deception, Jacob now gave his own blessings freely, with wisdom earned through a lifetime of struggle and grace. He died peacefully, gathered to his people, his transformation complete. And so ends the story of Jacob, the man who became Israel, whose descendants would carry his new name and his complex legacy through all the generations that followed. What are we to make of this ancient tale as we prepare for sleep? What comfort can we draw from the story of a man who spent so much of his life grasping, deceiving, and struggling? Perhaps the greatest gift of Jacob's story is its honesty about the human condition. We are all, in our own ways, graspers. We all have moments when we choose immediate gratification over long-term wisdom, when we manipulate rather than trust, when we scheme rather than wait. But Jacob's story is also a testament to the patience of divine love. Even when we are at our worst, even when we have made choices that seem to have closed every door and burned every bridge, there is still the possibility of encounter with something greater than ourselves. The ladder between heaven and earth that Jacob saw in his dream reminds us that the divine is always reaching toward us, even when we feel most alone, most exiled, most cut off from home and hope. Angels are ascending and descending, carrying our prayers upward and bringing blessings down, even when we sleep on stones in the wilderness of our own making. The wrestling match teaches us that sometimes our greatest breakthroughs come not through easy victories, but through honest struggle. Jacob limped away from his encounter with the divine, marked forever by the wrestling, but also blessed and transformed. Our own struggles with doubt, with pain, with the mysteries of existence, may be the very encounters that reshape us into who we are meant to become. And finally, the reconciliation with Esau shows us that forgiveness is possible, that old wounds can heal, that families torn apart by deception and favoritism can be restored through grace and time, and the willingness to humble ourselves before those we have wronged. As you drift off to sleep tonight, carry with you the assurance that your own story is still being written. The God who blessed Jacob, who wrestled with him, who changed his name and his destiny, is the same God who watches over your sleeping and your waking, who knows your struggles and your dreams, who sees not just who you are, but who you are becoming. Rest in the knowledge that even in your wrestling, even in your grasping, even in your moments of failure and regret, you are not beyond the reach of transforming love. Like Jacob, you may wake tomorrow with a new name, a new identity, a new understanding of what it means to be blessed. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be filled with ladders stretching to heaven, and may you wake refreshed and ready for whatever encounters await you in the journey ahead. The story continues, and you are part of it.